Even by the standards of a theocratic culture, such as that of the Imperium of Man, the Sisters of Battle are an organization defined by their faith. It was, in fact, the purity of their faith that convinced the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes to try and persuade them to turn against their insane master Gog Vandire, rather than simply cutting them down, as he and his warriors could very easily have done. This same purity also convinced the Captain General to vouch for the Battle Sisters, thus saving them from the reprisals exacted upon Vandire's other supporters after his execution. At a mere 5,000 years old, the Adeptus Sororitas is one of the youngest institutions of the Imperium of Man, and, despite the many thousands of years of dedicated service to the God Emperor and the Imperial Church, they are also one of the more minor institutions. This is partly due to their role as both the quasi-official military arm of the ecclesiarchy and their strong ties to the Inquisition, specifically the Ordo Hereticus. The other is due to the fact that they are mostly uninterested in the politics of the Imperium of Man, their very devoutness causing them to scorn anything that is not in direct service to the God Emperor himself. Essentially, unless it involves prayer or purging, these ladies simply aren't interested. This pious scorn for the ceaseless maneuvering and politicking of both the Senatorum and the High Lords is reflected in the organization of the Adeptus Sororitas itself. Unlike the incredibly informal structure and constant infighting of the Inquisition, or the rather complex hierarchy of the Martian tech priests, the command structure and organization of the Adeptus Sororitas is as straightforward and simplistic as the women who are its members. The sororitas are divided among various orders, each led by a canoness. The only complication here is that, because the sororitas have no numerical limit unlike the Space Marines, some orders can become especially large, too large for one person to lead effectively, in which case an order may subdivide, and each subdivision may be led by a junior canoness, ultimately subordinate to the one in charge of the order overall. The orders are in turn divided among the two convents, each headed by a prioress. There is the Convent Sanctorum, which is based on Ophelia 7, the official capital of the Adeptus Ministorum, and the Convent Prioris, which is based on Holy Terra. The best way that I can sum up the relationship between the two planets is to use a comparison to Catholicism. Think of Ophelia 7 as Vatican City, the official capital of the clergy, while Terra is comparable to Jerusalem, the historical and spiritual source of the religion itself. After all, the priesthood of the ecclesiarchy may be based on Ophelia 7, but the God Emperor himself, around whom the entire religion revolves, is situated on Terra. Anyway, above the two prioresses is the overall leader of the Adeptus Sororitas, the Grand Abbess, who is counted among the High Lords of Terra and may even occupy a seat at the Council of 12, though this is usually done as a stand-in for the High Ecclesiarch of the Adeptus Ministorum. Like I said, the Sororitas prefer not to be involved in politics. And yet, sometimes such involvement is inevitable. It is one of the many natural consequences of being an official Adeptus of the Imperium of Man. Having an official organizational structure is one of them, as is official recruitment. Unfortunately, there is no information regarding as to how new Battle Sisters were recruited back in the days when they were the daughters of the Emperor. But in modern 40k, the Adeptus Sororitas draws its recruits from the Schola Progenia. These are missionary orphanages/academies, and their student bodies are comprised entirely of war orphans whose parents have died in heroic service to the God Emperor. And it is here, through a combination of indoctrination in the Imperial Creed and the brutal discipline inflicted by the drill abbots that run them, that these orphans are molded into the future civil and military leaders of the Imperium of Man. The Administratum, the Ecclesiarchy, the Officio Assassinorum, the Inquisition, the Commissariat, the officer corps of both the Imperial Guard and Imperial Navy, and of course, the Adeptus Sororitas. Unsurprisingly, being an all-female and highly religious organization, when sororitas recruiters visit the local skolum, they are on the lookout for young girls possessed of an especially zealous piety. Said girls are then scooped up and carted off to either Ophelia 7 or Holy Terra to be inducted into one of the two convents, at which point the new recruits are trained even more harshly by their new superiors than they were by their old drill abbots back at the skolum. All the while, said superiors will be assessing them and their skill sets in order to determine which type of order each novitiate will end up joining. Because, you see, for reasons that have never been explained or even hinted at, when the Daughters of the Emperor were reformed as the Adepta Sororitas, they also decided to branch out into other activities. Activities that do not involve setting psychers on fire or putting bolt rounds through the heads of mutants and traitors. For example, recruits of an especially studious nature and or a gift for languages are given to the order's Dialogus. These sororitas devote their lives to translating the hundreds of thousands of human languages across the Imperium into either Low Gothic, the language of the common man, or High Gothic, the language of official records and the Church. Think of High Gothic as the Latin to Low Gothic's English. Some sisters Dialogus are trained in the study of Xenos languages, the better to understand the enemies of mankind, and thereby the better to purge them. Those novitiates with strong communication skills and the ability to stay calm under stress are given over to the order's Familis. These sisters, in addition to their religious studies, are taught such esoteric subjects as economics and trade, courtly etiquette, and even critical thinking. Once their training is complete, these sororitas are then placed in the service of various noble families throughout the Imperium, usually as chamberlains or counselors. Indeed, the Sisters Familis are in high demand among the imperial aristocracy for their skills as negotiators of house alliances, trade deals, and even marriages. At the same time, the Sisters Familis are there to keep an eye on their employers and use their influence to try and make sure that their new master's interests and decisions stay as close to the straight and narrow as humanly possible. Not exactly an easy task when your average planetary governor, in possession of all the wealth and power that implies, is also in possession of an excess of free time. Such a person's tastes often lean toward the overly indulgent, to put it mildly. Still, their diplomatic training makes the Sisters Familis unique among all the servants of the Imperium, in that when they encounter something that even smells faintly of heresy, their first reaction is not to automatically reach for a heavy flamer. Meanwhile, sororitas candidates of an especially gentle and caring nature are trained by the Order's Hospitaller in the arts of medicine, and are usually encountered as battlefield medics attached to the Imperium's armies. Think of them as highly religious Florence Nightingales in space, with a special emphasis on the Florence Nightingale angle. The average Sister Hospitaller is so gentle and sweet-natured, their bedside manners so excellent, that they are openly adored by the common fighting men of the Imperial Guard, who, given the choice, would much rather have the sororitas tend to their injuries than the cruder surgeons provided by the Imperium's logistical arm, the Departamento Munitorum. But, of course, because 40K is a universe defined by war based on a tabletop war game, the only sororitas orders that anyone really cares about, and consequentially the only ones that get any real detail or fleshing out in both the official game codexes and Black Library novels, are the Order's Militant, the actual Sisters of Battle. For while all sororitas are given basic combat training, it is the Order's Militant, derived from the most fierce and fanatical of sororitas initiates, that are trained exclusively to kill the enemies of the Imperium, whether they be alien, demon, or simply heretical. At this current time in modern 40K, there are 6 primary Orders Militant, each founded by Alicia Dominica or one of the 5 companions that accompanied her to the audience with the Emperor, all of whom eventually went on to die rather violent deaths in the Emperor's name. Saint Alicia herself founded the Order of the Ebon Chalice, and ultimately died in the year 650 M36 during the scourging of Friedzweid's world, where it is said that she suffered hundreds of wounds before finally succumbing. Saint Catherine, who was Alicia's right-hand woman, founded the Order of the Fiery Heart. After she was killed by witch cultists on the planet of Menestius, her fellow battle sisters chose to mourn her by renaming their order the Order of Our Martyred Lady. Saint Lucia, the youngest of Alicia's companions, would be tortured to death by heretics, but the fact that she made no sound during the torture lent to her order the name the Order of the Valorous Heart. Saint Silvana, meanwhile, was assassinated, though no one can seem to agree exactly who did it. For once, though, the martyrdom itself isn't the most important detail. What is important is that after her death, she was laid to rest in the convent prioris, but 7 days later, her body disappeared, leaving behind only the silver image of her skeleton on the death shroud, for which her order was named the Order of the Argent Shroud. Saint Mina's was the Order of the Bloody Rose. She met her death on Hydrafor, when a Chaos blood cult attacked her at prayer. It is said that when the body was found, it was soaked in blood and surrounded by at least 20 enemy corpses. Finally, there is Saint Arabella, founder of the Order of the Sacred Rose. She simply disappeared in late M36 and no one really knows what happened to her. Unlike the various Space Marine chapters or the temples of the Assassinorum, there is very little variety between the various Order militants in how they wage war against the Emperor's enemies. They're not ignorant of tactics, but for most battle sisters, religious zeal takes precedence over strategizing, and this often means that their tactical acumen is limited to a relatively basic formula. Have tanks, artillery, and battle sisters armed with heavy weapons provide covering fire, while the rest try to close with the enemy and kill them. They will pick off enemies at a distance with bolters or las weapons, they're not that picky. But given the choice, your average battle sister would rather be close enough to the enemy to either hack them to pieces with a chainsword or roast them alive with a heavy flamer. Sororitas armies generally tend to perform better when acting alone. This too is the product of their religious zeal. They don't trust the Mechanicus because they worship the Emperor in a radically different way from everyone else, and they don't really get on with the Space Marines either, mostly because of their tolerance for psychers. As for the Imperial Guard, it depends entirely on the regiment. If the regiment comes from a culture of particularly dedicated Emperor botherers, like, say, the Maccabean Janissaries or the Death Corps of Krieg, then the Sororitas will likely get on with them famously. On the other hand, Guard regiments from more primitive cultures, like the Attilan Rough Riders or the Kanak Skull Takers, is very likely to rub an Orthodox battle sister the wrong way. There have been numerous recorded altercations of Sororitas coming to conflict with allied Guard regiments. This was usually because the Guardsmen were from a feral world and engaging in practices that the sisters found objectionable, like, say, blood sacrifice. The Imperial Church does generally draw the line when it comes to human sacrifice, but as I stated before in my Imperium video, the Imperial Church itself doesn't really care how the various cultures of the Imperium worship the Emperor, so long as they are worshipping the Emperor. The Sisters, on the other hand, take a much dimmer view of the matter, and as I said before, most Imperial generals by now have learned to generally let the Sisters alone, and leave them to their own devices. This zealous and highly aggressive style of fighting preferred by the Sororitas extends to the types of troops they field and the names such troops are given. For example, veteran elites are referred to as Celestians, while battle sisters trained in the use of heavy weaponry, such as multi-meltas, heavy flamers, or storm bolters, are called Retributors. Then there are the Seraphim, battle sister assault troops trained to use jetpacks, once again to get in close and purge the enemy. Such naming conventions even extend to their artillery, the two most famous being the Immolator, which is essentially an armored troop transport with extra flamethrowers attached. Then there is the famous Exorcist, which is essentially a tank with a missile battery attached to the back, and which often look like the unholy, or I should say holy, offspring of a tank and a church organ. Regardless of rank or specialization, all Battle Sisters go to war clad in finely wrought power armor, equipped with some of the best weaponry the forges of Mars can provide, from chainswords to plasma pistols to flamers, all the way up to their most distinctive weapon, the Godwin Diaz pattern bolt gun. Gog Van Dyer was a violent nut, but he knew good equipment when he saw it. In fact, the weapons used by the Adeptus Sororitas today are the same ones that Van Dyer equipped them with all the way back in the Age of Apostasy. Of course, with Battle Sisters being as devout as they are, their weapons, particularly those that have either seen long service or were used by famous persons, are regarded as much as holy relics as weapons, and are often treated with great reverence. As I have, perhaps needlessly, repeated throughout this video, the Adeptus Sororitas take their faith very, very seriously. All aspire to serve the God Emperor with distinction, and perhaps when they die, be at his right hand at the Golden Throne. Their dedication is absolute, their purity of intent unblemished. The fact that the fleur-de-lis is the symbol of their order is an obvious connection to the French saint Joan of Arc, a woman who genuinely believed that she served the divine calling and was ultimately martyred for it. For all their faults, the Adeptus Sororitas are genuinely selfless in their devotion to the Imperium and the preservation of the human race. They will not hesitate to fight or even sacrifice their own lives if they believe it is in the service of the God Emperor. Although this dedication does mean, as in the case of Gog Van Dyer, that they can be deceived. Make no mistake, though, these women are zealots, with all the negative implications that entails, and they are almost as harsh with one another as they are with the Emperor's enemies. There is perhaps no better example than the final subject of this video, the Sisters Repentia. In the event of a Battle Sister screwing up in an especially egregious manner, she will, either in willing penance or at the orders of her superiors, be required to undertake the Oath of the Repentia. As the unfortunate sister recites the oath, her comrades ceremonially cut her hair down to her scalp and strip her of her war gear, leaving her only rags of cloth for covering. Her weapons are taken away, and in their place, she receives a massive two-handed chainsword known as an eviscerator. The ceremony complete, the new Repentia is led away to undergo merciless spiritual and physical conditioning. Her former comrades are no longer allowed to speak to her. As far as they are concerned, a Sister Repentia is all but dead. There is but one way in which a Sister Repentia may atone for her failure: by slaughtering the enemies of the Emperor, literally whipped into a mindless frenzy by their handlers, pointed at the nearest heretic, and sent to charge the front line armed with nothing but their massive chainswords. A few Repentia have been known to be able to redeem themselves and return to the ranks, usually by performing great acts of bravery and heroism. Most, however, only find absolution in death. As much as the Repentia are pitied by their battle sisters, they are also, quixotically, highly respected. Some battle sisters have even been known to willingly become Repentia even if they have done no wrong. For in their eyes, a Repentia is a sister who has given herself fully to the God Emperor's service. It is nothing less than the highest degree of devoutness and piety. The Sisters of Battle are not as well organized as the Imperial Guard, nor as powerful as the Space Marines of the Adeptus Astartes. But their loyalty, their dedication, their purity of faith is beyond question. They are the most zealous servants of the God Emperor, and no matter what the universe may throw at them, they will face it without fear. Be it orc war bosses, Eldar reavers, tyrannid hordes, or demonic obscenities, they will march into battle. The God Emperor's will in their souls and the words of the Fede Imperialis on their lips. A Spiritu Dominatus, Domine libera nos. From the lightning and the tempest, our Emperor deliver us. From plague, temptation, and war, our Emperor deliver us. From the scourge of the Kraken, our Emperor deliver us. From the blasphemy of the fallen, our Emperor deliver us. From the begetting of demons, our Emperor deliver us. From the curse of the mutant, our Emperor deliver us. A morte perpetua, Domine libra nos. That thou wouldst bring them only death, that thou shouldst spare none, that thou shouldst pardon none. We beseech thee, destroy them. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and check out our website at studiobrainstorm.net. And if you have a story that you think is worth telling, we are more than happy to help you publish it. Thank you, and have a nice day.